Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. The air hangs thick and acrid, tasting of sulfur and spent gunpowder, as Hong Shi-Quan fights desperately on a surreal plain of broken porcelain and blood-soaked earth. All around him, grotesque, horned demons swarm in an endless obsidian tide, intent on devouring his spirit. Hong is not unarmed. In his hand burns a magnificent flaming sword, radiating the terrible righteousness of a vengeful god. With every powerful, desperate swing, the foul creatures fall, dissolving into puffs of black dust. Yet their numbers are overwhelming. Just as exhaustion threatens to consume him, a sudden burst of blinding light tears through the gloom. A new figure appears, magnificent, clad in robes of pure light, radiating immense power. The tide of battle ceases. The fevered warrior looks up at his savior, stunned and awestruck. The figure turns, his eyes full of immense love and eternal authority. He declares, "Fear not, my little brother. I am here now. My name is Jesus Christ." That's when Hong awoke. His fever had finally broken. It was only a dream. But it was a dream that would spark one of the bloodiest wars in human history. It is 1837 in the remote village of Guanlubu, China. For the third time, Hong Shi-Quan has utterly failed the Imperial Civil Service exam, the only esteemed path to status. Since receiving the crushing results, he has been nearly catatonic, consumed by a fever that dragged him into this terrifying delirium. His family has watched with growing despair as he fights the invisible ghosts of his mind. But Hong Shi-Quan will soon awaken, convinced to his core of this new holy mission to destroy the evils that plague China, personified by the Manchu Qing Emperor and the officials who had rejected him. This vision, misunderstood and terribly powerful, will steal him. He will find enough faithful, desperate followers to create the heavenly kingdom of great peace, and in the process, instigate a conflict that will become one of the bloodiest wars in human history. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week, the show where we tell the badass history of badasses. I am joined today by a badass. He is the host of History on Fire. He's a historian, author, podcaster, and a good friend of Badass of the Week. We are joined once again by Daniele Bolelli. Daniele, thank you so much for coming on and coming back to the show.
It's always fun to chat with you. So yes. And today we are going to have as insane as, we are used to insane topics. This takes the cake. It takes the level of insanity 10 notches up. So this is going to be quite wild.
Yes. Today we are talking about the second bloodiest war in human history, which is, it's one of these things when we talk about Chinese history, because obviously World War II is the bloodiest war in history, but you would think World War I would probably be the second, but it's not close to the Taiping Rebellion from like 1800s China, where, I think about this when I do history stuff. You talk about like, some of the more famous battles of European history. Okay, Battle of Hastings, the Norman Conquest. There's like 1,000 guys on each side of that battle, and it's like this epoch-changing event that like is still taught in school 1,500 years later, 1,000 years later. And around the same time, you have the Chinese, and they're fighting Mongolic kind of tribes on the border, and the description is just like, yeah, there was 1 million guys on this side, 1 million guys on that side, 1 million guys died, and the Chinese won. And there's like no more detail than that, because they kept really good records of all this stuff, but there's no like this army moved this way, this army moved that way. But then you stop and you're like, I don't think there was 1 million people living in London at the time that this battle was fought.
The numbers are insane. And yeah, when it comes to China, of course, biggest country in the world, most populous place ever. So yeah, the scale tends to be a little different.
It's one of those things, like, I think Mandarin is possibly the most spoken language in the world, but they only really speak it in that one country. Yeah, so the scale of things is going to be nuts, and the way in which, we'll talk about it, and China's kind of primed in 1850 for this war that we're going to get into, but the way in which it starts is, I think, unlike anything we've ever encountered.
You can definitely say that, yeah, because we start with one guy. The thing about Hong is that it sounds like the most obvious, whatever kind of story you can think of. Hong is a guy who grows up in a small village in southern China. He shows some intellectual promise, so a lot of his fellow villagers put their resources into him to build him up so that he can study and work hard and get lessons so that he can take the imperial examinations, which are the exam in China at the time to get any kind of job in government, in administration, in anything else.
Right. Because he's from kind of a small town, and he's from a group that's an ethnic minority in the country. And so, the China has this massive bureaucracy, and if you want to get out of a small village in the middle of nowhere, your best option is to pass this exam, get a job, move to Beijing, and try to become like influential. So like this is their version of like getting drafted by Major League Baseball.
And it has about the same odds, because passing the imperial exam, no, not quite, but passing the imperial exam has like a 1% success rate or something ridiculous like that. It's like almost nobody passes it. So there's a lot of pressure. Anybody who's trying to do that, the fact that, you're in line with 300 guys and that maybe 3 will get to pass. And so there's, you study for months, in some cases for years. You have all your village behind you praying that you make it. There's a lot of psychological pressure going into it. And the good old Hong does it the first time, not surprisingly fails. Does it the second time, fails again.
And this is like a big deal because, like you said, the whole village has to come together. Because not only do you have to study for this exam and pass the exam. The exams must be extremely hard, but also you kind of mentioned in your podcast. So Daniele has an amazing podcast series on the Taiping Rebellion. You do 5-6 hours worth of content here. We're gonna boil it down to maybe 1 hour, but yeah. So you were saying that not only do you have to be smart enough to pass this exam and dedicated enough to do all this studying, but you also have to be able to pay for the schooling and the training that you need. And you have to show up to the exam with some cash that you can hand out to the exam administrator so that he'll make sure to not throw your final exam in the trash. So the whole village has to come together. Like, okay, you're the guy. The whole hopes of the village are riding on you. You got to go pass this exam. We're going to pool our money with the hopes that you'll get into government administration and make our lives better by working through government to do that. So he's not just disappointing himself. He didn't just fail the bar. He's failed his mom, his dad, his neighbors, his entire village. Everybody's mad at him, his wife.
And it happens once a year. So it's not that you screw up and you get to try again next week. You have a whole year, you study again for a whole year, then you go back, fail again, then you... So, by the third time he's ready to take his exam, the stress level is off the charts, because after a while, of course, you got to start seeing the writing on the wall that maybe you're just not going to pass it if you're not able to. So there's a lot of stress. And one key thing that happens at this time is that while he's in line waiting for the exam, somebody passes him a pamphlet of like Christian missionaries in China that pass a pamphlet about Jesus and Christianity, this and that. He doesn't think much about it. He just collects it and goes on his merry way to try his third attempt at the exam and fail it.
Right, right. And like in addition, like, the country is very strict Confucianist, and the exam, it requires a lot of like Confucian understanding of Confucianist thought. Like it's a test on Confucianism more than it is most anything else.
Absolutely. And after three failures, the guy has a serious breakdown. He comes home and he flips out. He has a clearly all the sign, checks all the boxes for a nervous breakdown. He ends up spending a month in bed, hallucinating, screaming. He's just, his psychology is shattered to pieces pretty much by these repeated failures.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny part is, well, he comes out of it when finally he starts, quote unquote, making sense again. And I use it very loosely because the stuff is going to be crazy. I don't know if I would call it making sense, but he's like, oh, no, you guys, I wasn't having a nervous breakdown or anything. I just had a month-long vision where I was taken to visit my father, who happens to be God. And then he's into, oh, and by the way, I found out that I'm Jesus' Chinese younger brother. And Jesus, and he has this whole interpretation of the vision that will be helped by the pamphlet that he took a look at. That's like this weird mix of whatever he grew up with Christian ideas, and his whole thing is basically, okay, so forget about the fact that I failed the exam 3 times. I'm actually God's son sent to Earth to cleanse China from all demonic influence, which means that evil Confucianism that screwed me over during the exam. And, Buddhism and Taoism and all of that. And I'm here to bring the one true way. And so, literally you have a guy who's the crazy guy screaming on the corner. That's...
Right. And this is kind of the wild thing, that this is the beginning of the story of the second bloodiest war in human history. 30 million people are going to die here. That's more than the populations of many countries. 30 million people. That's more than like all Americans have ever been killed in battle, I think. And in like the history of the country. And so this guy is 29 years old. He's a failed civil servant. He fails the civil service exam 3 times, has a psychotic break, starts telling everybody he's Jesus's Chinese little brother, and 30 million people die.
Yeah, that's the gap where you're like, wait, what? Because it makes sense, right? Okay.
Right. I could see this story before. This makes sense. And his friends are probably just kind of like, yeah, or, oh yeah, you saw God. Okay, cool. Yeah. No problem, man. Sounds good. Maybe you should try gardening or something instead of civil service, So, okay. So I guess let's put Hong on hold for a second, because he is now decided, I failed this test and now I'm going to kill everybody associated with it. But, he is going to find a way to have this take hold. And there are China at this time, let's assume very little knowledge of the state of Chinese relations in 1850. It's kind of primed for a crazy guy to show up and incite violence against the government.
Yeah, I think there are 3 main factors to look at that clarify a little bit what was going on in China. One is the Manchu, who are the ruling ethnic group, and they are not Han Chinese, unlike the majority of the population. They are a population from like northern steppes, sort of picture Mongols. They're not exactly Mongols, but picture Mongol type of lifestyle that came in, conquered China in the 1600s, and founded the Qing dynasty in 1644. So they are realistically, the way most Han Chinese look at them is that they are a foreign domination. They are foreigners with foreign customs. So there's a degree of hatred for the government.
Right. They're conquering barbarians. They don't even speak the same language. They have different hairstyles. They have different clothing.
Absolutely. So it's fairly pervasive, the fact that the government wasn't very popular, that there are a lot of people who don't like them for ethnic reasons, among others. So that's one big factor. The second one is the fact that, as you hinted earlier, Hong came from the Hakka. The Hakka were an ethnic minority in southern China that faced a lot of discrimination from everybody, from the Manchu ruling government, from Han Chinese, so there's that factor that the Hakka were looking for something to unite them because they are getting kicked around left, right, and center from everybody who comes. So and Hong initially, his movement is going to spread primarily among the Hakka initially, because it's going to be like, hey, any ideology can help us band together and defend ourselves against all these threats is a good one. So he has a little bit of a lead there because of the situation that the Hakka were facing. And then I guess the third factor that's not as directly affecting Hong, but definitely affecting the overall picture, is the fact of the Opium Wars, that is a long rabbit also. To make it super quick, basically what happens is the British Empire had a trade deficit with China. They were importing from China a lot more than China was importing from Great Britain. They don't like that, so they need some kind of something that the Chinese will buy massive amounts to even the scales a little bit of the trade.
And what do they sell them? What do the British have to offer the Chinese in exchange for tea and spices?
A bunch of drugs. Specifically opium, that they control opium fields in India. They have a lot of, so they start selling opium. And opium, guess what? It's popular in the 1800s as much as opioids are popular today. So
yes, opioid epidemic in China, 1850 edition.
Yeah,
this one's kind of government sponsored. Well, foreign government sponsored. It's a foreign invasion, basically, because their government doesn't support it.
And that's the funny part about the Opium War, that China, of course, reacts the way a lot of countries do when they have a major drug epidemic going on, which is they start prohibiting, in very harsh terms, the drug trade. And this is where the story gets weird, because the UK says, wait, no, you don't get to, we want to keep selling drugs to your people, and we have the British Navy here to make sure to enforce it. So one of the things that only halfway joking I said during the podcast was that Queen Victoria was, by comparison, Pablo Escobar or El Chapo were amateurs, because Queen Victoria is, granted, it wasn't just her, she's the figurehead, but she's basically the figurehead of the biggest drug empire there is, because unlike Escobar or El Chapo, they have the entire power of the British Empire behind it to facilitate the drug trade. So they beat up China during the First Opium War.
Right. The closest comparison here would be like, the U.S. went in to deal with Escobar and they sent troops into Noriega. But imagine invading Panama to stop the drug trade, and then Panama kicks your ass and invades you and then forces you to take more drugs.
Exactly. I mean, even if you want to see it as today, there's such a huge fentanyl problem in the United States and so on. Imagine that, yes.
We go to shut down the trade across the border from Mexico, and then Mexico defeats us and makes us sign a treaty saying, okay, fine, we'll take all the drugs you got.
And in some cases, you can make an argument that the fentanyl epidemic of today is payback for the Opium War, because that's essentially the same. It's China selling a bunch of drugs to US, whereas in the past was the West selling a bunch of drugs to China. But
the Chinese have a long memory too, so you can't even rule that out.
And of course, US, UK, to them is it's the West. It's the Western world that has done this. So yeah, that's the Opium War clearly is a problem, because it weakens even further the position of the central government, because getting beat up by a foreign power is embarrassing. It's humiliating. Many Chinese would have looked at it like, okay, you are foreign barbarians who are ruling over us, but at least you are good at defending us from foreigners. Oh, no way, you're not even good at defending us. So what good are you?
You're Mongols. Aren't you supposed to do Mongol things here and win some battles for us?
So it's we already don't like you. On top of it, you're not even good at defending us from the neighborhood bully. What are you in power for? So that creates even more of a desire to get rid of the central government and even less loyalty among good chunks of the population. So I think these three factors go a long way to explain what seemed to be unexplainable on the surface, which is how the crazy guy screaming on the street corner can go from the street corner to ruling an army with millions of people who follow him. Because it's think like any big cult that, but big with relative terms. Think like Jim Jones in Guyana. Think Jim Jones, but rather than having 1,000 people with him in the middle of the jungle, having an army of over 1 million people who will follow him, because that's what's going to happen in the years to come.
Okay, so I guess this is probably a good part for us to take a really quick commercial break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about how this guy who just spent the last month having insane delusionary visions is going to raise this army of 1 million people and turn it into an even bigger army. So we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Badass of the Week. I am here with Daniele Bolelli from History on Fire. And Daniele, we are following our friend Hong now. And Hong has his villagers have backed him. He went to take the civil service test 3 times and at great expense, both, through time, energy, and money. He's failed all 3 times. He passes out in his bed. He's so sad. He has like a psychotic break or a mental break, nervous breakdown, goes into his bed, hallucinates for like a month that he's fighting demons with a giant sword, and wakes up, says, "Oh my God, I'm Jesus Christ's younger brother. I'm going to cleanse all of the evils from China and take over, and it's going to be amazing." How does that guy? I mean, the village was behind him, and they helped back him for the test. But so how does he kind of begin his quest of getting them to be like, okay, sure, I'll fight in a war against the imperial government for you?
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning, it will become abundantly clear, but it's worth mentioning that Hong is an awful, awful, awful human being. He's just with a flair for the dramatic. There's a great quote at one point as he's going in and out of his vision where he's just goes, "My days are counted, my life will soon be closed. Oh, my parents, how badly have I returned the favor of your love to me?" He's clearly flipping out over the failures. And then my favorite part, which goes with the awful human being, is his wife was pregnant at the time. And, Hong clearly believes that he's going to die as he's wasting away in bed. And rather than say, hey, you're pregnant, you're going to have our child. If I die, find someone else. He's like, this is mid 1800 China. So Hong is like, never remarry. Whatever happened, I die, you'll have nothing to feed yourself on, but I don't care. You are never allowed to remarry. It's like,
you'd be sad forever and think about me all the time.
Preferably you should kill yourself if you really were a good wife. But if you really want to go on, just make sure you're miserable, basically.
I'll allow you to stay and not kill yourself just because I love you. But
yeah, pretty much. That's Hong.
But be sad and wear black forever.
He comes out of it, and here essentially he started a very small scale local level, just talking to people and do you want to hear about my older brother Jesus, and do you want to hear about my plans to clean China from all the evil that's out there? And, interesting enough, he does find some people, not a lot initially, who are like, yeah, please do tell me, because, everything is collapsing around me. We are getting kicked around by non-Hakka. We are discriminated. The government is on shaky legs. He goes to a bunch of desperate people who don't have a whole lot to live for. And they are like, you know what? this guy sounds at least self-assured. Why not? It's
This guy sounds like he knows what he's doing.
yeah, exactly. He seems very convinced when he's telling me that he's God's son. So why not? It's the way cults work. Most people who are super well adjusted don't join cults. You go to A, desperate people, or B, people who may be successful, but they have some huge hole inside of them, something that's psychologically missing, and they are looking for a father figure. They are looking for something like that.
Sure. But I mean, even then, like David Koresh fought like a branch of the ATF, like Nexium had a bunch of people, but never raised an army. Like this is kind of the thing that because this starts to get out of control. I love that one of the first things he does, he works at like a school and he goes to the school and he smashes all the Confucian tablets.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, hey, stop doing that. And like his brother like beats, or his cousin or somebody like beats him up. Like, don't don't break the Confucian tablets.
Yeah, and that's where the sources are a little shaky, because they tell you how, he went from, getting beat up by his relative for smashing the Confucian tablets to suddenly getting more people. And now there were 50 people listening to him, and now 200, and now 2,000. And you're like, wait, how? How is exactly? Mm-hmm. And really, the only thing that the sources tell us is just they go back to this fact that the Hakka were desperate, and he would unite them in this like self-defense type of army if you join my thing. And many people who may have not even been sold on the religious message, they like the idea of, this guy is going to unite us in a way that no one else has done so far. So that's his card.
And this is very successful. And he starts bringing in some Han Chinese as well. This thing starts to grow. And at some point, and you were talking about the Opium War, but it's like not too long after the end of the Opium War, everybody's pretty annoyed and they're looking for kind of anything, I think. And he officially declares against the Qing dynasty in 1851, once he feels like he's got a position where he can do that. And he's far away from where the Qing base of power is. He's in the south, and the Qing base of power is up north in Beijing.
Absolutely. So it has taken a while. It has definitely, he has gone through the various stages of people, convincing people door to door initially before all of these, before getting to this place where he's openly challenging the government. Because initially, when he was like, I'm going to cleanse China from all the demons, he was primarily talking about religious stuff. He was against Buddhism, he was against Taoism, against Confucianism in particular, against all the traditional Chinese system of various religions. But eventually he take it from religious crusade to, and by the way, the heads of the demons are the government, and we need to graduate to armed insurrection against the government. So that's a jump,
Yeah.
which he does only once his numbers start getting a little more serious. And so it takes a good chunk of time before he gets there, but eventually that's the direction where he goes.
Right, because he has his visions in 1837, and so it takes him like 14, 15 years to actually declare against the government. And this whole time he's preaching gospel to anybody who will listen to it. I loved what you said in your podcast where you were like, he didn't say, I invented this new system and let's follow that, because that would not resonate so well with the people. He kind of found all of these weird loopholes in Chinese history and was like, no, it's always been like this. It was the Qing that messed everything up, and we can just put it all back the way it used to be.
It's funny because Hong is so anti-Confucianism, and that technique is the most Confucian thing of all, because where it comes from, that idea is because Confucianism is so conservative with the idea that the way of the ancestors is the best, that the old way is the best. So in a cultural context in which that becomes widespread, what that means is that you cannot just come up and say, I invented something new, because then you're basically saying I'm smarter than the ancestors, which would be pure heresy. You have to say, no, I'm rediscovering something that has been lost. So I'm really going back to the even older traditions that you guys are familiar with. It's totally made up, but that's the loophole to try to present something that's an innovation. but couching it within the context of, no, I'm rediscovering tradition, which is, the most Confucian thing you could possibly think of.
Not to mention that Confucius died 500 years before Jesus.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so suddenly, like, he goes from crazy dude in his bed to like small cult to like, whatever's prayer group to controlling a village to raising an army that, I guess it's unclear how many of his followers were like, I'm all in on you being the son of God, and how many of his followers were like, let's get these Qing out of here and retake China, and you can't be worse than those guys. So like, let's give you a shot, right? Let's replace that dynasty with a different dynasty that might be more Han-centric and more powerful and be able to stand up to the British.
Yeah, and Hong started wearing a yellow robe, which was something that only emperors were allowed to wear. So it's beginning to get to his head pretty fast.
Yes, he's the heavenly king, right? He calls himself the heavenly king, and Taiping is the Taiping heavenly kingdom, he declares.
Yeah, no, and his program is weird because, of course, like the response from the West when, this happens more later, but when they start hearing about this revolution happening in China, on one end, you're going to have Christian missionaries who are like, oh, cool, this guy is almost Christian. But then they're like, wait, but no, some of his stuff is really not very Christian at all.
This sounds like heresy.
Yeah. There's that argument among Christian missionaries where it's like, well, do we want to go with the guy who's at least 30% Christian? Well, yeah, he's definitely heretic, but at least he's a start because it can be the gateway drug to real Christianity. Or do we go with the guys who are 0% Christian? And so he's like, well, I guess heresy is better than nothing at all. So there's a little bit of support in the West initially when they hear about Hong.
And that's one of the wilder things thinking about this stuff is that, when we're talking Chinese history and, this guy with the civil service exam, which has been around for centuries at this point in China. And everything about this story, he has a dream that he's killing demons with a sword. He wakes up, he declares himself emperor. He starts wearing yellow robes, raises an army in the south to fight the army in the north. This is all stuff that we have seen in the Three Kingdoms. It's all stuff we've seen throughout Chinese history. But the idea is that kind of blows my mind with this is that this is happening in 1851. So like he's trying to create like diplomatic relations with China and France or with France and England. And, they have guns and there's photographs of this guy. So the time period, this feels medieval or like, 200 BC or something, but it's happening around just before the American Civil War.
No, it's insane. And that's what makes it wilder is both how recent it is and how massive it is. And he preaches the stuff that he goes pretty, for example, he has this whole anti-sex crusade. So, which I guess is kind of convenient because having a massive army of sexually frustrated people is good since it's probably make you more enthusiastic about killing people. But, it's like he takes all these messages and takes them pretty far. So,
which is another weird thing about this guy, because usually the cult leader is the one that gets all the girls in the cult. But maybe that's why those cults never really expanded into military violence. They just kind of are like, oh, get all the girls and then, we'll all have sex and then everything will be fine. And I don't really need to go to war.
Hong manages to do both because, of course, there are rules for everyone else and then there are rules for him. So somehow, mysteriously, all his anti-sex thing apply to everyone else, not to him and this growing number of concubines,
What about that? Didn't he write like a poem that you had to sing if you were like feeling any kind of urges?
Yeah. It's like... Yeah, he has like the most demented song ever that's supposed to calm down any kind of sexual urge. And I was like... I don't know, man. I don't see that happening.
You got anything stronger?
But so, it's a totalitarian movement. It's very harsh, chop your head off if you break the rules, and there are 10 zillion rules. And again, despite that, people keep joining, partially because they want to, And partially because once you're in, it's not exactly easy to get out because, again, any infraction, any behavioral, you get your head chopped off. So it's one of those that, what was it, Hotel California, that once you're in, you can never get out kind of thing. It's a little bit like that.
But that's kind of Chinese history in general, though, right? Like, they've never had democracy up to this point, and I guess till now. But the other emperor is going to chop your head off if you do it. It's like the emperor chopping your head off because you displeased him has been the way things have been going for 2,000 years by this point in China. And like most regular people don't know any other reality than that. So it's like, we'll replace one dynasty that's weak with one that's strong. I don't believe the Qing will cut my head off for declaring for Hong, but I do believe that Hong will cut my head off if I don't recite this song every so often.
Well, and even the thing is, the Qing may want to cut my head off, but they are far away, whereas Hong is right here, and essentially I'm right there with the big sword. I'll take the one who kills me now versus the one who may kill me later. So it's... but yeah, you are right on the timing. 1851 is when, I love the declaration too. He celebrates his birthday by, which by the way, I'm a little peeved about the fact that we share the same birthday. We have the exact Yes, so I'm not too thrilled about that part, but he proclaims the birth of what he calls the heavenly kingdom of great peace, which of course is the beginning of giant civil wars that will lead to 20 million dead. So yeah, there's that.
When people have to tell you they're peaceful, that usually means they're not, right? Whenever somebody has to tell you something about themselves, like, I would just assume this about you. If you have to tell me this thing about you, whether it's like, I don't want to do any violence. Okay, I was assuming you didn't want to, but now that you said that, I'm kind of thinking you're thinking about violence.
Completely. No, it's, and in fact, the contradictions are so many and so obvious that but once you're in a cult, you're in a cult. So logic no longer matters at that point. Never mind that, as we said, even if you do recognize the contradiction, what are you going to do? Tell him about it? Try to run away? Those are really your only option. You tell him, you get your head chopped off for being a heretic. You try to run away. If you're caught, you get your head chopped off. So, there's pressure to keep enforcing what from the outside looks like obvious insanity. Once you're in, there's a lot of incentives to keep it going.
And there's this kind of collective mentality sometimes too, where like you can get like once a bunch of people believe it, all your friends believe it, then I feel like it's a little easier to believe something crazy if you're like, wait, am I crazy because I don't think he's the son of God, right?
Of course. That's classic cult mentality when you're in a big group and you're like, am I the only one who think differently? And maybe I should just go along with what everyone else says because... Yeah, there's that. It does start getting, so eventually the government start taking notice of this guy and this growing number of followers, and they're going to go after him. But by the time they go after him is where the numbers have gotten so big that it's not so easy to squash. So there's going to be a long list of early battles that the Taiping army, because by this point is a full-fledged army, is fighting against the government forces. And it's a back and forth, but actually going fairly well for the Taiping, for the Taiping movement. So they gain ground, despite losing some battles here and there. Oh, in the early years, they are definitely gaining ground, gaining more land, and overall doing fairly well.
Right. The Qing has kind of exhausted itself fighting the British in the Opium Wars, and they're running out of money. They don't have the manpower or the money, and the people they have are not super well trained or equipped. And they're fighting this rebellion that's very far away from their base of power. Like you said, they're Manchu, which is Manchuria, which is even more north of Beijing. And all of this is happening in the south. So they've got a long way to go to fight these guys. And there's not a lot of support for them along the way. And the regular people aren't supporting them either. So this little uprising, this guy with the psychotic break becomes a cult leader. And now he's marching on major cities. He's conquering provinces and capturing cities.
Yeah, in 1853, they take Nanjing, which is as big a city as you could possibly think of, which, think about it. A decade earlier, Hong was like some drop out from in the imperial exam on the street going, I'm so mad, I'm so sad. And now, a little over a decade later, he's controlling one of the biggest cities in China.
Right, a former capital. Nanjing used to be the capital for some of the empires.
So that's a big, big reversal. This is probably the high point of the Taiping Rebellion. At this point, it looks like they actually have a shot to maybe toppling the government and starting their own dynasty. They are not going to finish the job. They are actually going to start getting into the idea of controlling some of the land they have. They slow down about controlling Nanjing rather than using the momentum they had to push toward Beijing. Now, who knows whether they could have done it or not, but they definitely had a chance, whereas by staying put, they lose that chance. And by the time they ever decide to do it again, the balance of power will have shifted and they will never be in a place where they actually can win the war the same way they are in 1853, which is, I guess good, because you can imagine if the damage that this guy did in the years that he was around, if he actually started a new dynasty, one can only imagine what horror would have happened.
And he's the Heavenly Kingdom of Peace, but he's not being very peaceful with some of these areas that he's taking over. He's kind of smashing the Confucianism everywhere he can find it. They're all demons and evildoers, and he's cleansing China by massacring civilians, which is pretty intense.
You can definitely say that. So yeah, there's that. And but early 1850s, they are very successful.
Yeah, and we have two kingdoms now. We have a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom, and we see this a lot of times when we talk about Chinese civil wars. But it's happening here, and this guy, like you said, they've done it. They've got a capital. They're set up in Nanjing now, and they rename it. And this guy's, like you said, walking around like the emperor, wearing the yellow robes. He's now a rival emperor.
One of my favorite things in this story happened after they conquered Nanjing in 1853 and then shortly thereafter, because Hong had not thought this through very well. So one of the things he had done is...
No.
Amazing, but true. One of the things he had done is that he had named quite a few people like as sort of his right-hand man. And some of them giving them not just political power, but also a lot of religious sanction. There was one of them in particular, Yang, where Yang started, when the movement became popular, he started arguing that he was channeling God's voice. And so while Yang during a regular life was just Yang, when he was channeling God's voice, he was speaking in the name of God. Now, God is even superior to Hong in the hierarchy of the Taiping. He's the father. So I have no idea how Hong did not see that coming, but you're always...
Oh, you're Jesus's brother? Oh, cool. I'm God, actually. So
exactly, And Hong initially, rather than having immediately murder when the guy was clearly making a move for a higher authority, he was like, yes, that is absolutely true. He speaks in God's name and he confirms my rule. And he's like, do you really not see where this is going? Because of course, eventually Yang decided he doesn't want to be number 2 anymore. He wants to have the top job. So he starts some of his revelations when God is speaking through him. They start becoming a bit anti-Hong and it's very clear what's happening, that is beginning to diminish in Hong power to raise his until he'll become the leader of the movement. So what we have now is the Taiping meet the Sopranos, and we have this is something that Martin Scorsese would do a fantastic job directing, because we have essentially a series of mafia hits among the Taiping, where Hong clearly realized he needs to get rid of Yang. But how do you do it after you say that this guy is speaking God's name? So, it's got to be a whole series of complex machinations to have him murdered. And it's set up in this very devious way where it seemed like they're all friends. And of course, in like every other great mafia movie, that's when things usually go bad. It's like, yeah, let's go for a drive together. You sit in the front, that type of vibe.
Just want to have you and all your guys over for dinner. We'll just talk.
Absolutely. My favorite is when, technically he has a couple of other guys murder Yang. And what happens is that Yang, after he got murdered and a bunch of his servants and his entourage got murdered, he still had a lot of supporters. So Hong plays it smart and goes like, this murder of my brother Yang, this is horrible. It's I'm going to catch the guys who did it and we're going to punish them. And so what he does is he invites all of Yang's supporters to witness the executions of the guy who started this coup against Yang, as if he has nothing to do with him. And the best thing is that these guys believe him. And they are like, oh, yeah, Hong, they killed our guy, but Hong is a good guy who's trying to, not knowing the obvious, which is he's the one who sent the assassins. So he grabbed the ones who were the assassin, put them up in the middle of the square. He had gathered all of Yang. Everybody has to drop their weapons, of course, before they go in to assist at the execution. So he gathered all the Yang loyalists in one place. And at that point, he has them all killed. And so, yeah, it's a charming tale.
Yep. Yeah, great. Yeah, we should all everybody who likes can come witness the assassination of his murderers. Oh, well, now that I have you all here unarmed, guess what? Bad news. I'm the one who did it.
Yeah.
It was me the whole time. And so but now, I guess he's got a huge army at this point, but can you really afford to massacre that much of because it's like hundreds of people involved, like thousands of people that are killed in this incident. And so can he really afford to sacrifice that much of his leadership?
Easily, because he has over 1 million people following. So having 10 to 20,000 people killed doesn't even move the needle. It's not a big deal.
The scale of the stuff is staggering.
Yeah. So, but of course, there's what you're saying. There is a side to it that makes sense, which is once you start having that much internal fighting, even if the numbers are still good, even if you have a huge army, it's not a good sign, because it's one thing when you had a fully united movement where everybody was a hardcore believer. Once you started having assassination of the leadership, usually is a sign that there are cracks appearing in the building and things can break down.
Outside, the optics aren't good for the rest of the supporters. Be like, oh, well, what happened to Yang? Wasn't he the voice of God? Yeah, actually, we don't talk about him anymore. He's gone. Hung at him, whacked.
But yeah, think about the title of Jesus' younger brother places a hit on the voice of God.
It's not a good headline if you're Hong trying to build support among your people.
Doesn't happen every day. That's a pretty good one.
Yes. And so, so they have this kind of, they capture Nanjing, they make a move for Beijing, but they're not successful. They're kind of consolidating power, and while they're doing, but rather than successfully consolidating power, they're just infighting and bickering. And while they're doing this, the Qing and the Western powers are kind of reorganizing and taking a stronger look at what's going on down here in the South.
And, the Hong is trying desperately to get support from the West because he's basically saying, hey, I'm a Christian. So you guys, you are Christian, I'm Christian. We should support each other against the evil.
Jesus. You got to help me, right?
Jesus, you're my brother. Mom, I'm your guy. And of course, initially, many European powers are like, oh, that's kind of interesting, actually. But then, of course, you cannot get past some issues of theology where the guy is like, yeah, no, I'm not just Christian. I'm Jesus' younger brother. And these are some of our core beliefs that, of course, don't match up with the Orthodox version of Christianity at this time.
Yeah. You had us until you said we were on board until you told us you didn't want us to import more heroin.
So he's not making the inroads he was hoping to make by getting Western allies. His paranoia is getting bad, so he's having one of his best generals at one point has to flee because he realized that it's just a matter of time until Hong's paranoia get to him and he's gonna be the next one murdered in another round of purges. Mm-hmm. So he loses a big chunk of his army when this general splits. he's really not playing it very well. His dictatorial tendencies keep climbing. He has, servants fanning him constantly, but if anybody gets too close to his face with the fan, they will be scourged in the public courtyard. Start getting a little.
That's not really turn the other cheek, is it?
No, definitely not. So that's part of what's going on. Now, he's helped a little bit by the fact that in the second half of the 1850s, the Second Opium War kicks in. So the central government gets kicked around by the UK one more time, which it helps Hong quite a bit because at least they are distracted for a while. What else? There's a lot of details, so we're trying to figure out what we want to cover and what not. Is there any particular spot where you want to jump in next? Because we're getting toward the latter part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's time, right? I think he's kind of worn out his welcome, and the Western powers are kind of like, we've had enough of this guy. I don't really. We were curious when they were like, oh, there's a rebellion in the South that's pro-Christianity. They were like, oh, this is interesting. Let's see where this goes. But now that he's kind of shown what he's up to, the Western powers are like, yeah, we aren't interested in this guy taking over. This guy's going to be more of a headache than the guys we're already dealing with. And the Qing obviously don't want him to replace them. So now not only are they, they've raised millions of people with guns and cannons to fight, and swords and spears, all this stuff to fight this war, and they're winning, and they've carved out this little kingdom for themselves. But now they've got to not just fight the Qing dynasty, but they got to fight the entire world.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's the main failure of Hong, is the failure of diplomacy. Because there were some moments where he had some Western support, but he unfailingly screws it up. So he's going to end up fighting... at one point when they try to invade Shanghai, he's going to fight against the French and the British and the Chinese. So, it's clearly getting a little bit, he's a little bit over his head by this point. There are 10 zillion characters in this story that are fascinating on their own. There's from... this one guy who was a Westerner, was a leader of this militia fighting against the Hong. There's one of the main generals for the central government that they send after him. He's almost he's like a character. He's like a stereotype. He's like constantly one step away from suicide. His letters are almost hilarious how negative they are, because everything that happens is always like, oh, of course this happens to me because I have the worst luck in the world and I'm terrible.
Who is this?
He's the main general that the central government will put against the Hong.
It's just like this sad, just Eeyore, like General Eeyore, just so sad.
He's exactly Eeyore. He's
it's terrible. We're doomed.
Yeah. So I mean, if you really want to get into the details, there's a lot of stuff that's incredible. But of course, that you end up with a 10-hour podcast kind of thing.
Right. And you cover a lot of this. So I do want to say that if any of this Taiping Rebellion sounds interesting to you, History on Fire you have a 3-part series on it that is, I think, comes out to like 5-6 hours worth of content where you really drill down into some of the really specific parts of the battle. Because there are some really interesting things. It's probably not going to come up too much, but we have, I wrote in the past about a guy called Frederick Townsend Ward, who was an American guy that founded this militia in Shanghai when the Taiping were getting ready to take it over, and he like helps organize them, and that's the unit that that Chinese Gordon eventually takes over and has a lot of success with for the British. There's all these really interesting stories in here, but like you said, it's tricky to drill down into them too far for kind of a general overview of this. So he does end up fighting against the world, and his own guys. Like he's got his own people are deserting him now, and things are starting to turn on him. And I think I have to do one more ad break before we wrap up. So let me do that right now. We'll take a really quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll kind of tell the end of the story and why this is such a fascinating thing.
Absolutely.
All right, welcome back to Badass of the Week. I am here with Daniele Bolelli from History on Fire, and Daniele, it's the third act for the Taiping Rebellion here. Things are not going well, and they try to take Shanghai, which would have been a major success, and they have the armies with which to do it. They have the numbers to do it, but they are, Western powers are getting involved with their with better technology. The Qing are training up. Money and manpower and weapons are being funneled in here to fight the Taiping, and the Taiping fail to take Shanghai, and it's starting to go against them.
And by this point, you're talking about a 10 plus year civil war going on. Devastation in the south is unreal. Much of the country has been destroyed by this. Millions have died, not only in the fighting itself, but a lot. I mean, even when we say the 20 to 30 million who have died during the Taiping Rebellion, a lot of them were due to starvation. A lot of them were not necessarily killed at the tip of a sword. Many of them were due to the starvation that the war created.
Because both sides are burning crops and agriculture too. Like it's the total war. So as they're moving forward, the Taiping are like, we need to slaughter the demons and stuff, and they want revenge for all of the bad things the empire has done to them. So they're destroying and burning and plundering. And then when the Qing take back those towns, they have to punish the population for taking part in the rebellion. So they're wantonly like slaughtering and destroying and plundering and purging. So it's bad news for the regular people of China in this area are suffering severely.
Yeah, some of the quotes really tell you, these are like primary quotes from the time, where one of them say, everywhere in southern Anhui, they are eating people. So now you go to cannibalism because starvation is so bad. In another one, Zhang Guofan wrote, everything is yellow straw and white bones. You can travel an entire day without meeting a single other person. And this is China, where population density is insane.
Right.
So to travel a whole day without meeting a single person, not a good sign about what happened there. The sufferings start getting unreal. And so everybody, including Western powers, they're like, hey, we're going to have no one to sell opium to at this rate. If this guy is up, we need to put an end to this.
Did you guys not consider that when you started this war?
So yeah, it's looking really, really ugly. And of course, anytime you're talking warfare, starvation, diseases, cholera start making the rounds, killing a whole bunch of people. It really gets bad. Now, by the way, under the file Medicine in the 1860s, the French officers were really puzzled by the fact that cholera victims that they treated the Western way, which was mainly with brandy, did not survive. Who would have ever guessed? Whereas, oddly enough, actually, some of those with Chinese medicine tend to do better. So that was like, I don't think bread is the medicine for cholera. I don't think that's what.
It's the solution to all your problems.
But so they start losing. The Taiping start losing battle after battle. Some of their main generals have to surrender. One of them is subjected to the famous Chinese thing known as death by 1,000 cuts, where they start chopping things off one by one as a form of execution. Now, the idea is that if they are nice, they first cut your throat, so then the rest of the chopping is more symbolic than not. But if they're not in a good mood, they start with non-lethal cuts, and that would make the process a lot less pleasant.
Yeah, that sounds awful, right? It's one of these things where, when you're talking about, and this is not medieval, I keep thinking it's medieval. I keep having to place this as like 1855, 1860. Governments find really interesting ways to just kill people as painfully as possible. I was just doing an episode where we were talking about somebody being, we did Guy Fawkes. We talked about him being hanged, drawn, and quartered, which was also just like, there's just somebody sitting there being like, what else can we do? He's still alive. We could do something else, right? how many times can you cut this? How many times do you think you can cut this guy before he dies?
That's basically what Death by a Thousand Cuts is going to look to find the answer to that question. Yes. Hong is getting crazier than ever. When his generals are beginning to report, look, we are done. We are losing in every way. We have no alliances. Our supply routes have been cut off. We are starving. Hong, that maybe was really just as crazy as advertised and not just an opportunist, start reassuring them. It's like, I've received the sacred command of God, the sacred command of the heavenly brother Jesus, to come down into the world, to become the one true sovereign of the myriad countries under heaven. Why should I fear anything? There's no need for you to petition and no need for you to take charge of the administration. And he goes basically like, don't worry, I have it all under control. And his guys are like, ow, we are starving.
Cool, because they're outside right now. They're outside the city walls. So whatever weird magic you're planning on doing, you should do it now.
Yes. So it's, Hong at one point where one of them is like begging them, like the people are dying. And Hong start reading a chapter of Exodus, tell him that God will give them manna to eat. And then he asks his servants, okay, bring forth the manna. And they're like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
And he's all mad. He's like, how can you not understand me? And so he gathers a bunch of weeds that he finds and starts eating them. And his followers are like, okay, that's getting weird. And then the best part is that after he eats this random stuff that he finds on the street, he gets sick and dies.
That was good for those servants, because when he was just like, bring forth the manna, they're like, oh, we're dead, we're gonna die.
So he died of food poisoning after saying, don't worry,
let them eat hemlock.
So died Jesus' younger brother.
Man. What an amazing story.
Yeah.
It ended just as weirdly as it began.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay, so Zheng Guofan, he's the Qing dynasty general who was doom and gloom all the time. He does eventually retake Nanjing, 1864. Nanjing falls. Hong Xiuquan, he dies of illness by accidentally commits suicide, however you want to call it, in June of 1864. The city collapses pretty shortly after his death, and the Qing, like as we keep seeing everywhere that they're going, they need to punish the city, so they annihilate the population.
The legacies, I guess, of it there are quite a few. The Qing dynasty have been hobbled badly by the civil wars plus the opium wars. The British were hoping that they would come back somewhat strong in order to, they needed a stable government for a good trade. But, after you demolish them with the opium wars, after the Taiping Rebellion took place, there was nothing strong left among the Manchu. They hobble along for a few years until eventually, in a few decades, by 1911, they'll be deposed, and it's the end of that dynasty. The relationship with you're gonna have both like nationalists like Chiang Kai-shek, who see themselves as defenders of traditional values against foreign ideas, which of course in this case was communism, whereas earlier on the foreign idea would have been Christianity through Hong. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, the nationalists like the Taiping because they fought against the foreign Manchu. So it was always this weird legacy. It was like, well, we kind of like Hong for some stuff, but we don't like him because he's Christian, so there's a very complicated.
And that was going to be a question of mine, is like, how is this rebellion viewed by the current government in China? Because on the one hand, it is a peasant revolution against the imperial system. And so there's stuff there, but then they're also like super fundamentalist, like weird Christian sect. And also this guy was obviously insane. So, how is it perceived? Like, are they the good guys or the bad guys in Chinese film? Or are they just not talked about?
Not that talk about, and when it is, it's really a coin toss, because depending on which way you want to emphasize, they are, the nationalist aspect is good. Well, I don't know that is good. It's good.
Yeah, it's acceptable by the government.
Exactly, because it's like, oh, you are fighting the foreign dynasty. But then, of course, you are doing it in the name of some batshit crazy religious ideology. That's also, because you took a foreign religion already bad, and on top of it, you gave it this insane spin as it filtered through your muddled brain. And of course, communism is not too fond of organized religion of any kind, so that doesn't work either. So it's one of those cases that, in order to give it a good read, they have to ignore part of the story. So it tends to fluctuate a little bit back and forth the way it is. But when you look at the whole thing, you're talking about a decade and a half of civil war, some 10 million troops participating, some 600 cities that change hands back and forth during the fighting. And conservative estimates of 20 to 30 million dead, with high estimates going as high as 100 million, but those are probably inflated.
Yeah, it's hard to document that because, like you said, a lot of it was civilian casualties that people didn't write. The people who starved, and they didn't necessarily get counted in the official numbers. So I had to look this up real quick, and the number of people who died in this war was more than were under arms for both sides combined in the American Civil War by a lot, by way more.
American Civil War is like 600,000 something, so it's like amateur hour.
Oh, I just mean not dead. I mean that actually participated in the war. There weren't 20 million soldiers in that war. Forget about dead.
The scale of it all is insane. And the funny thing about it is that how many people, if you tell them the Taiping Rebellion, have any idea what you're talking about? It's not
right.
When you talk about World War II, of course. Talk about World War I, of course. You talk about the Taiping Rebellion outside of China, not many people have ever heard of it. And yet it's the second deadliest conflict in human history, which is rather wild.
Yeah, that's just such an unbelievable thing. And the death toll is so high, and it's a country of 1 billion people, but still this was felt by the Qing dynasty. It's 17 provinces collapsed economically after this war, and this huge loss of civilian life and military life, and is just devastating for the Qing dynasty, and they do not survive it. And it kind of sets China on this path to where they are today. And it all comes from this one guy being mad that he failed his SATs.
Yeah.
And it's a wild story. So I guess, Danielle, here's a question for you. Is Hung Xiuquan badass?
I like to think badass in a positive way, or at least in a...
Doesn't have to be positive. A badass doesn't have to be positive. I guess there is something...
But, the thing is, there's nothing that he does that's personally brave or larger than beyond. He gets a bunch of people to die for him. So had he been as crazy as he was, but at least you can give him the prize for being ridiculously brave or tough or something. You can make an argument. Here, he's just a cult leader using other people's desperation for his own ends. So... I don't think... I think the story is badass, because it's such an insane tale that it's larger than life. But he himself, I have a hard time finding any redeeming quality in the guy.
Sure. But there are so many badass stories that come out of this, right? Chinese Gordon and his attacks. I wrote about Frederick Townsend Ward. Even the general Zheng Guofan, he's really interesting guy as well. And you dig into a lot of those stories in your series on the Taiping Rebellion for History on Fire. And so if you guys liked this episode, I strongly encourage you to check that out, because for every weird sort of story we just told, Daniele's got 4 on his podcast series that we didn't have time to get to today.
But I think that's what's fun about doing history is that sometimes you can tell, if somebody tells you, hey, tell me this story in an elevator, you have 45 seconds to tell me this story. You can do it and it's still cool. You know what I mean? It's like, can you believe crazy guy who failed the exam, has a nervous breakdown, start preaching that he's Jesus' younger brother, attract 1 million people, launch the biggest civil war. You're like, just in a few sentences, you're like, what the hell, you know? But if you tell me, okay, you have 6 hours, okay, let's dive into a lot of details and go. So to me, that's the beauty of history, that there's always a way to tell it in a way that's interesting. It's just depending on how many details or not you want.
I love that when we were talking about structuring this episode, when you wanted to come on and you're like, I want to do the Taiping Rebellion. And I was like, okay, we could definitely talk about the Taiping Rebellion, but your podcast is like 6 hours worth of content and there's so much stuff going on here. It's like this huge war. And you were like, Ben, we could do this podcast in like 8 minutes if you wanted to. Like, we'll figure it out.
Absolutely. That's, you either go narrow in and go into the details or go big picture. But absolutely, can be done either way.
That is great. Well, Daniele, this was really fun. I'm really happy that you came on to tell us the story because it is wild and, it is badass. And just the scale of ridiculousness of what happened in southern China in 1862. Really crazy stuff.
I should mention, I guess there's a connection between these and immigration, Chinese immigration to the United States, because the fact that this is happening in the 1850s, which is shortly after the gold rush, that means that as southern China is getting absolutely wrecked by the civil war, there are a lot more people who are looking for a way out as they find out that there's gold being discovered in California, that there's economic opportunities in the United States, a lot of poor southern Chinese whose life have been destroyed by the Taiping Rebellion are looking for a new start in US. Or even just come to US, make some money, send it back home so that your whole village doesn't starve.
Right. You think about that because there's a lot of Chinese immigration into California around this time period, and there were very restrictive laws discriminating against those immigrants. And you think like, oh, well, why would you come into this? Why would you voluntarily walk into this scenario where every law is designed to like discriminate against you? And the answer is because, well, back in my home village, there's like two armies at war and they both want to cut my head off. So this is better than that.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, wow. Okay. So Daniele, thank you so much for being on the show. That is the Taiping Rebellion. And you are the host of History on Fire. Where else can people find you online?
Yeah, I mean, for the podcast is the usual, the various Spotify, Apple, all that kind of stuff. I do one thing that if people are interested, I have a Substack that's there's the free component is the biggest one because everything that I write, I usually write a couple of essays, mostly about history, not always, but mostly about history that I write. Couple of essays on my Substack that's under my name, Daniele Bolelli, and that one is free. And the only thing that's behind the paywall is if people want bonus episode of History on Fire. So that's more for hardcore fans. But the free stuff, there's plenty of content there. So if anybody wants to check it out, it's on Substack.
And you have a second podcast feed as well. That was the one that I went on when you interviewed me.
Yeah, and I'm about to have a third because what happened was...
you don't have enough work. You don't have enough to do with your time.
Terrible idea, because right now I heard recently that there are 6 million podcasts out there, but Arizona State University asked me to do a course about the history of Rome, and so I put so many hundreds of hours in preparing it that at that point I was like, you know what, it's not worth it for a course. I might as well. So I'm going to do a whole podcast, a new podcast about the entirety of the history of Rome from mythological origins to fall of the Roman Empire. So I'm going to start cranking it out. Probably, I'm guessing I'm going to start releasing in January or February.
Wow. And what's that going to be called?
Don't know yet. I'm still thinking a little bit. So yeah, I'm writing down episodes right now because I want to have enough of a lead before I release the first. But yeah, I'm thinking about the logo, the title, all that stuff. But that's coming up soon.
Good stuff. Well, you'll have to come back when that launches and talk about a Roman so that we can.
There's a lot of insane stuff there. That's for sure.
Yes, there's no shortage of, how often you think about the Roman Empire. Okay, Daniele, thank you so much. It was great having you on the show, and we look forward to seeing you again on here really soon.
Thank you.
Have a great one. And thank you to you guys for listening to this episode and for following the show. We're always happy to have you here. And we look forward to seeing you next week with another badass. Until then, have a great one and stay badass. Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. Executive producers are Dwayne Johnson, Danny Garcia, Andrew Jacobs, Hiram Garcia, Brian Gewirtz, Frankie Chaparino, and of course, me, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and my semi-regular but always awesome co-host, Dr. Patricia Larish. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Our mixing, music, and sound design is done by the incomparable Jude Brewer. Production support by Jean McGale-Waite. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, tell your friends, and tell your enemies. And please leave us a review. If you want to support Badass of the Week, please check out our Patreon page. We'll be back next week with another one.